Hi guys, here we are with the last segment of the class, just trying to get that in there. Chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, but now we're just going to concentrate on chapter 12, talking about subcultures and consumer behavior. So just to review, subculture is a group that shares certain beliefs, values, and customs and exists within a larger society. So a subculture can stem from someone's ethnicity, religion, geographic location, age, or gender, or also could be a special interest that you might have. We've talked about subcultures before. There we go. What is a subculture? A group that shares certain beliefs, and also, as I said, based on social, cultural, demographic variables, and as I just said before, can stem from someone's ethnicity, religion, geographic location, age, or gender. Okay, so what's the deal with subcultures in marketing? Why do they care about them? So marketers tend to want to single out a particular subculture that they want to target, and they'll modify the product to meet that target. So, for example, it could be, for married women, the product specifically for women who are married or for women with children, that kind of thing. Okay, so subculture defined is a distinct group that exists as an identifiable segment within a larger, more complex society. So subculture has beliefs, values, and customs that set them apart from the other members of the same society. All of us belong to a subculture, whether it be based on gender, religion, educational status, that kind of thing. Everyone belongs to some level of subculture. All right, so let's look at society's cultural profile. So essentially, society's cultural profile includes two elements: the unique beliefs, values, and customs of a specific subculture, and the central or core cultural values and customs that are shared by most of the populations, regardless of the specific subculture memberships. Hopefully that makes sense. So we see there's a Venn diagram here, and that there's a subculture, then there's a general population, and then in the middle, how that overlaps are the general cultural traits of all of our citizens. Okay, so you might want to think about this. What subcultures do you belong to, and how do you think it affects your consumer purchases? So, for example, you belong to the subculture of students, so of people who are engaged in study right now. So that's going to impact what you buy, how you spend your money, how you spend your time, that kind of thing. And or you may be a gender subculture or a geographic subculture, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk about nationality and ethnicity. So we, as everyone knows, America is a melting pot, so to speak, of many different ethnicities, and when immigrants come in from the very beginning, 250 years ago, we are all immigrants with the exception of Native Americans. We brought different cultural values and lifestyles that blended into the American culture. So, and then each culture has sort of blended in and come up with American diversity, which we still see reflections of that. For example, so I'm half Irish and half Polish, so I feel safe using that as an example. So St. Patrick's Day, for example, or with the Poles, many of the Easter celebrations. For the Poles, Easter is a very big holiday, so we see a lot of that, particularly in Western New York. We see a lot of the Easter celebrations, that kind of thing. That's bringing in something that so all of us as part of it. So the one group we're going to look at in the book that has chosen to look at too are the Hispanic population, because that really has grown so much in the past, say, 30 years or so. And in many states, in the state of California, for example, whites are the minority, and Asians and Latinos are more the majority. So It is a population. Latino population is one that marketers are very interested in because they have growing uh, buying power and growing population and all that kind of thing. So anyway, this is just for example, this is a profile, the Latino Hispanic customer. Also, African American consumers also have very large buying power. Of what $1 trillion. Um, More than 50% of African Americans are less than 35 years old, so that means they're going to be in the market for a long time. And their preferences are they prefer leading brands over private label brands, and that this is based on data that's been mined. African Americans spend more than any other segment on hair, clothing, and telephone services. So if you were selling one of those products, you might want to focus your advertising on an African American subculture. Okay, another growing group in the United States are Asian Americans, also growing very, very quickly. It's a diverse group. There are, when we talk about Asian Americans, they fall into different categories: Chinese, China, the Philippines, India, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. They live in metropolitan areas. Generally speaking, Asian Americans tend to live more in metropolitan areas than, say, rural or suburban areas. Or metropolitan. When I say metropolitan, I mean urban and suburban, as opposed to rural. They are they own a lot of businesses and that kind of thing. They have high educational aspiration. So anyway, those are just to look at some of the trends right now in ethnic subcultures. So there's also sort of a couple of charts in the book that you might want to take a look at in terms of product usage and television viewing based on ethnicity, which is worth taking a look at so you kind of get a feel for what's going on in the outside world. Okay, so now we look at religion and consumer behavior. So there's we look at two different groups. One are born-again Christians, fastest growing religious affiliation in America. They make up about 72 million of the 235 million Christians in the United States. So from a marketer's perspective, born-again Christians are fiercely loyal to a brand that supports their causes and viewpoint. Jewish consumers, no significant differences with respect to brand loyalty and word of mouth between American Jews and non-Jews. But religious requirements or practices do, however, sometimes take on an expanded meaning. So you'll often see on food packaging a U or a K, which responds to Jewish dietary laws, kosher. The K is kosher or ultra kosher, which is very important, just as it is for many Christian groups have some dietary restrictions. The Catholics, in particular, during certain times of the year, the Jewish population also does. Okay, so targeting urban consumers. So we're going to look at New York, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, San Francisco, and LA, the top 6 metropolitan areas in the United States. So, and there are, just certain things that through marketing, through research, marketers have determined what it is that consumers in those areas are interested in, and they will, they'll target their products and their marketing and their messages towards that. You can read through those. Okay, so we looked at ethnicity, we looked at urban versus suburban. Now let's look at age subcultures in terms of generational subcultures. Every generation has a distinct subculture market segment, also because each of its members have some sort of unique priority and purchase patterns. So you can take a look at these. Again, this is a chart from the book. The Depression era, or GI, generation age is like 75 and over. World War II or silent generation, those are 66 to 74. There's the older baby boomers and the younger baby boomers. The baby boom goes again from 1945 to 1964. After that is Generation X, or millennials. Generation Y, and then what we refer to as homeland generation or digital natives. Those are under the age of 18. You could also refer to them as people who are post 9/11, born post 9/11. Okay, Generation Z are those that were born from 1997 on. Also, the digital natives of the homeland generation. They tend to be highly connected. Their parents are Generation X, which of course are the millennials. It's a very diverse population, uh, and they are expected to earn less than their parents, which is sort of contrary to the American dream, but that is what is going on in our country now. This is really just going through a look at all the different subcultures right now. Okay, so then teens and tweens. Teens and tweens, generally speaking, are very fickle consumers. They have very changing lifestyles. Teens are age 13 to 17. A tween is 8 to 12. So that's Generation Z is kind of right now comprised of teens and tweens. Of course, there'll be a next generation. We'll always have teens and tweens, but right now Generation Z is focusing on when marketers look at their plan. This is what they're looking at, these two different groups of people. So I'm sure many of you remember, it was not that long ago that you were a teen or a tween, what life was like. We talked before about family influence in the previous chapter, and how as the teen gets when you become a tween, you start to have a little bit more autonomy in choosing things. Okay, Generation Y, 1980 to 1996, also called Echo Boomers and Millennials, tend to embrace technology. They tend to be very confident. They want things that are very interactive and quick response, that kind of thing. So you can see there what it is that how they spend their time in terms of buying things, how they buy things. This is just really, like I'm going through, these are all profiles of different subcultures. And it's a way to develop these profiles. I'm not saying that everybody falls exactly into these profiles. I'm not suggesting that everybody in these groups completely fall exactly into these profiles or share these same profiles, but it's a way for marketers to better understand what the general trends are with these different subcultures, and it helps them to better market to them and understand them and to determine what the message is going to be to them. So it's a general outline. There needs to be when you're coming up with your target segment, who your market segment is. You need to have some idea as to what their psychographic, not only their demographic profile, but they're also their psychographic profile. Okay, so there are essentially 6 segments of millennials. The Hippennials, they believe that they can have an impact on the world and make it better. They're aware of what's going on globally. They give to charity and search for information regularly. They may read social media content, but they don't necessarily produce it. The millennial moms enjoy traveling, getting in shape, and treating their children as they were treated, which is pampered. They're confident, they're family-oriented and proficient in technology. They participate in social networks online and are very attached to their peer groups. Anti-millennials, on the other hand, care mostly about their businesses and their families, in contravention to the millennial norms. They don't buy green products like most millennials do. They seek comfort instead of change, whereas most millennials embrace different activities to make life more interesting. Okay, then there's the gadget gurus. They're always looking for the next big gadgets, usually from Apple, and will stand in line to get them first. They're highly egotistical, wired, free-spirited, and laid back. They often create content online and tweet continuously. Gadget gurus are male-dominated and single because they live in their own world. So there you go. Clean and green millennials take care of themselves and support others. They're driven by social causes, ecological issues, philanthropy, and positive outlooks on life. And finally, there's the old school millennials. They don't adapt to many typical millennial rituals like updating their Facebook pages during meals. They'd rather meet people in person than online or through text, and read books instead of blogs. They're independent and self-directed, whereas most millennials want mentors and constant feedback from their manager. So those are old school, sort of like harken back to, say, previous generations of folks. So again, even like within this subculture of the millennials, there's even more subcultures, and marketers, that you can have that defined of a group, and trying to determine how they're going to behave in the marketplace will help determine what the product design is, and then also what the message is and where you might sell your product. Okay, Generation X, 65 to 79, those are the post baby boomers. They tend to be a little bit more, they're a little more cynical. They're not interested necessarily in labels. They oppose insincerity. It's they're sort of, to a certain extent, maybe a little bit of a reaction to the baby boomers. Okay, speaking of which, we're going to go through the baby boomers. 40% of the U.S. adult population. They have a majority of the disposable income. They want to look and feel young. They tend to be the yuppies. It was a term popular in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, this idea of the yuppie. So it's a yuppie meant young urban professional, upwardly young urban professional. So that's a quick look at the baby boomers. Okay, then there's older consumers. So we want to take a look at those as well. It's very important. Older consumers often have it's really the post-retirement segment that we look at a variety of different ages for them. The feel age is, so can we talk about cognitive age? Okay, so cognitive is how their brains are working. How old someone feels. The look age is how they look. The do age is how active they are. You have some 85-year-olds that are very active, and some 75-year-olds that are very sedentary. And then interest age is people who are are they interested in things that young people are interested in, or are they interested in people who are interested in things that only old people are interested in? It's kind of as you go on in life, you'll meet people who, even though people could be 35 but still be old, or people can be 65 and very young. So also we'll look at chronological age categories. There's the young old, which is 65 to 74, the old, which is 75 to 84, and then the old, which is 85 and older. And then there's this whole idea of the new age elderly, which again, this idea of being very elderly individuals who think, feel, and do according to a cognitive age that's much younger than their chronological age. And they feel a little bit more control in their lives, and they're a little bit more active. Okay, so how is it that you market to older consumers? That can be kind of a tricky thing, because you never know. So, because a lot of seniors don't want to be identified, that is not necessarily by what they did in the past, but what they personally want to accomplish in the future. So, you also want to take into consider the idea of older people in technology. Older internet users, age 65 or older, are the fastest growing demographic group with respect to the U.S. internet market. Generally speaking, it kind of gives us some idea of being very independent, that they might feel more independent because of the fact that they have this technology. In other areas, they've lost their independence. Excuse me. Okay, so role of gender in consumer behavior. Generally speaking, women show superior affect and purchase intention towards ads that are verbal, harmonious, complex, and category-oriented. In contrast, men exhibit superior affect and purchase intention towards ads that are comparative, simple, attribute-oriented. So you want to think about that if you're focusing, if you're trying to sell a product to a woman, you want to make sure that the message is, as I said, harmonious, complex, highly verbal, harmonious, and complex, as opposed if you're selling something to a man, you want to have it a little bit more comparative, and a simpler, more direct message. So these are, again, things that people think about when deciding what they're going to buy. And the other thing, too, is that there are different types of working women. And you also want to, that's kind of a sensitive issue with some women. And in terms of, they're stay-at-home housewives, or they're just there temporarily till their children are back and go to school, that kind of thing. Okay, and here we go. That just kind of goes over what what I was talking about before with what kind of message is it that men and women are looking for in an ad, or in some kind of marketing communication. Okay, so thanks, guys. And that wraps it up. As I said, a quick overview of subculture and a look at a variety of different types of subcultures. We looked at ethnic, age, and gender. Okay, thanks.